The morning sky above Kalar 9 did not rise so much as assemble itself, piece by shining piece, as the planet's three orbital mirrors woke from night mode and poured pale blue light over the frontier city. Towers of glass and magnetized stone hummed awake. Cargo drones zipped between market bridges, and somewhere above the clouds, a custom satellite argued with a merchant ship about unpaid docking taxes. Ethan Vale stepped out of the repair shuttle with a tool case in one hand and a half-eaten protein bun in the other, already regretting both. The bun tasted like someone had described bread to a machine that hated happiness. "Fantastic," he muttered. "Breakfast with the emotional range of a brick." No one heard him except a cleaning robot, which beeped in a tone that sounded judgmental and rolled away. The market below the landing pads was crowded with species from 12 systems. Tall crystal-skinned diplomats, tiny amphibian bankers floating in water spheres, armored courier insects clicking impatiently, and Kalari citizens moving through them with graceful silver eyes and long, elegant ears. Ethan had seen many alien worlds since leaving Earth, but Kalar 9 had the strange beauty of a place pretending not to be lonely. Everything glittered, yet every wall seemed built to keep someone out. He noticed her near the edge of the marketplace, seated beside a stall that sold memory lanterns. She looked almost human at first glance, a young woman with delicate features, dark hair falling beneath a gray hood, and long ears partly hidden by the fabric. But across her face, faint luminous markings curved like cracked starlight under her skin. They were beautiful to Ethan, like nebulae trapped in porcelain, but the crowd treated them as if they were wounds. People avoided the space around her without looking at her directly. A child pointed, and his mother gently pulled his hand down, whispering too sharply. The woman lowered her head, as if the whisper had weight. Ethan paused. He knew that movement. He had seen soldiers do it after hearing metals called mistakes, refugees after hearing doors lock, mechanics after hearing engines explode immediately after they promised the captain, "Trust me, I fixed it." He walked toward the memory lantern stall, mostly because his assigned repair dock was behind it, partly because the woman's loneliness sat in the air like a distress signal no one wanted to answer. As he passed, his boot struck a loose anti-gravity tile, and he wobbled with all the dignity of a drunk flamingo. Several aliens stared. Ethan recovered, lifted one finger and said, "That was a traditional human greeting, very sacred. Please do not imitate without stretching first. Nina sing kwaruan ina intendan." One tiny banker bubbled with laughter inside its sphere. The hooded woman looked up despite herself. Her silver eyes met his for the briefest second, guarded and tired. Ethan smiled, not brightly, not foolishly, but simply, as if nothing about her required caution. "You look beautiful today," he said. The words were quiet, ordinary, and honest. Yet the market died around them. A drone froze midair. The lantern seller's mouth opened. Somewhere, a spoon dropped into a bowl, with the dramatic timing of a courtroom verdict. The woman stared at Ethan as if he had just handed her a star and asked whether she wanted it wrapped. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The markings on her face shimmered once, soft blue beneath the skin, and the glow reflected in her stunned eyes. Ethan glanced around at the silent crowd. "What?" he asked. "Did I pronounce beautiful wrong? Because my translator once turned good morning into, your grandmother is a suspicious vegetable, and I'm still banned from Velo Station." A nervous laugh escaped someone nearby, then another. The woman blinked, and against all expectation, after years of being watched like a flaw in public light, the corner of her mouth trembled upward. By noon, Ethan discovered that a single sentence could travel faster than a smuggler's ship with unpaid fuel debts. The whole market was whispering about him before he even reached Dock 17. Some said the human had insulted Lyra in a code so ancient only poets and criminals understood it. Others claimed he had performed an earth-mating ritual, which made Ethan choke on his second protein bun so violently that a courier insect offered to put him out of his misery. "It was a compliment," he said, wiping crumbs from his jacket. "On my planet, we do those sometimes without starting diplomatic incidents." The courier clicked its mandibles. Humans are reckless. We also eat soup with forks when desperate. Fear us. Behind him, Lyra stood beneath the half-open wing of a damaged cargo skiff. Her hood still raised but no longer pulled low enough to hide her face completely. She had followed him after the market silence broke, not because she trusted him, but because confusion was easier to carry than loneliness. Ethan had not asked why she came. He only handed her a diagnostic scanner and said, "Hold this like it is important." It isn't, but machines respect confidence. For a moment, she simply stared at the device, then at him, as though waiting for the hidden cruelty that usually arrived after kindness. None came. The repair bay glowed with suspended holograms, rotating engine schematics, and blue sparks from graviton coils that pulsed like mechanical hearts. Ethan worked with calm hands, speaking to the skiff as if it were an elderly relative refusing medicine. "Come on, sweetheart, you cannot die today. I already filled out 3 forms, and if you explode, I'll have to fill out 4. Lyra's mouth twitched. Do all humans threaten machinery with paperwork? Only the polite ones. She looked down quickly, but not before he saw the small smile. The markings across her cheeks flickered, a faint silver-blue shimmer chasing the lines beneath her skin. The scanner in her hand screamed. Ethan jumped so hard, he hit his head on the skiff wing. Ow! Good news! The scanner is alive. Bad news. It hates joy. Lyra panicked and tried to cover her face, but the glow had already spilled through the repair bay, like moonlight poured into water. Tools lifted gently from the table, suspended in a trembling field of energy around her. A wrench floated past Ethan's nose. He narrowed his eyes at it. "You see? This is why I never trusted you." Lyra backed away, breath sharp, ears trembling beneath her hood. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It happens when people stare." Well, technically I was staring at the flying wrench. Very rude of it to steal attention. She stared at him, startled by the absence of fear. Outside the transparent bay wall, workers had gathered, their faces pressed close enough to flatten dignity itself. Ethan waved at them. "Private repair session. Unless one of you knows how to convince a graviton manifold not to behave like a dramatic opera singer." No one moved. Lyra whispered, "They think I'm cursed." Ethan lowered his voice. "Are you?" Her eyes lifted. "No." "Then excellent. I only had room in my schedule for 1 cursed engine." The glow slowly weakened. The tools settled one by one, except the wrench, which dropped into Ethan's open hand as if surrendering. Lyra touched the markings on her face, looking more frightened of hope than of the crowd. "No one has ever called them beautiful," she said. "They call them fractures, a defect from birth." Ethan leaned against the skiff, rubbing the bump on his head. "On Earth, we have people who pay money to draw glowing lines on their faces, usually in clubs with music so loud your bones file complaints. HFY and She let out a small laugh before she could stop it. The sound was fragile, surprised, and astonishingly alive. Outside, the watching crowd went silent again, not with mockery this time, but with uncertainty. For the first time, they were not looking at Lyra as if she were broken. They were looking as if they had missed something obvious, something standing in front of them for years beneath a gray hood, waiting for one honest voice to turn on the light. The next morning, the Council of Harmonic Conduct summoned Ethan with the urgency normally reserved for meteor strikes, engine meltdowns, or restaurants that claim to serve authentic human coffee. He arrived in the marble chamber still wearing his oil-stained jacket, because no one had warned him that being polite to a lonely woman required formal clothing. The chamber floated above the city, inside a transparent dome, with Kaler 9 turning slowly beneath them, its markets and shipyards glowing like circuits across desert stone. 12 counselors sat in curved silver seats, their long ears decorated with rank crystals, their faces arranged in the exhausted seriousness of people who had forgotten how chairs worked. Lyra stood near the center, hood lowered for the first time since Ethan had met her. Her dark hair framed her face, and the luminous markings across her cheeks pulsed softly, neither hiding nor apologizing. Ethan noticed how tightly she held her hands together. He stepped beside her without ceremony. One counselor narrowed his eyes. "Human Ethan Vale, do you understand why you are here?" Ethan looked around at the enormous chamber, the armed ceremonial guards, the hovering record drones, and the floor that seemed far too polished for anyone's emotional safety. "I'm guessing it's not because my repair invoice was approved." A few younger attendants coughed into their sleeves. The oldest counselor, Veyron, leaned forward. Yesterday, this woman produced an uncontrolled resonance field after receiving emotional stimulation from your statement. Ethan glanced at Lyra. That sounds much more scandalous than, I said something nice. Lyra's lips twitched, but she forced herself still. Veyron's crystal circlet flashed. For generations, the facial fractures carried by her bloodline have been classified as unstable defects, dangerous, shameful. At that word, Lyra flinched so slightly, only Ethan seemed to notice. He felt his humor retreat, not vanish, but fold itself quietly behind his ribs. Before he could answer, a historian drone rolled forward, projecting old records into the air. Images shimmered, ancient Kalari, with the same glowing markings, standing beside star maps, guiding ships through magnetic storms, healing broken power cores with fields of light. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. These records were sealed after the Meridian Civil War, the drone chirped. Original classification, celestial resonance lineage, cultural status, honored. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a denial. Ethan raised a hand. Sorry. Just to confirm, you spent centuries bullying people for having what is basically built-in emergency lighting and possibly star navigation magic. The historian drone rotated toward him. Simplified, but not inaccurate. Ethan pointed at it. I like this toaster. Lyra covered her mouth, and this time the laugh escaped her, soft but clear. The markings on her face brightened, casting silver-blue light over the council floor. The guards shifted, afraid for a heartbeat, but nothing exploded. Instead, every floating record drone gently aligned around her like small, obedient moons. Veyron stood, shaken. This cannot be true. If the old records are correct, then our traditions were wrong, Lyra said. Her voice was quiet, but it crossed the chamber like a clean blade. Everyone turned to her. For years she had swallowed words until they became stones inside her chest. Now, one loosened, then another. You told me I was a mistake before I even understood my own reflection. You called my face a warning. You taught children not to sit beside me. And all this time, you were afraid of a history you buried. The chamber trembled not from anger alone, but from the resonance responding to her courage. Ethan leaned closer and whispered, for what it's worth, excellent dramatic timing, very counsel shaking, 9 out of 10, she whispered back. Only 9? You didn't point at anyone. Lyra slowly lifted one finger toward Veyron. Ethan nodded gravely. 10. A ripple of laughter moved through the attendants, nervous at first, then human enough to be honest. Veyron looked as if laughter itself had filed a rebellion. But outside the dome, through the transparent walls, hundreds of citizens had gathered on sky bridges and hover platforms, watching the broadcast. Among them were people with hidden scars, strange colors, uneven ears, forbidden markings, and bodies their world had named imperfect. One by one, they stopped hiding. Lyra saw them, and the light beneath her skin steadied into something beautiful and terrifying. Not a curse, not a defect, a signal, and for the first time, Kalar 9 began listening. By evening, the sky bridges of Kalar 9 no longer carried only passengers. They carried whispers, arguments, songs, and one elderly fruit seller who had painted glowing blue lines across his cheeks with jam because he claimed history should be edible. Ethan saw him from the repair bay window and nearly dropped a plasma cutter. That man is either starting a movement or losing a fight with breakfast. Lyra stood beside him, her hood folded in her hands instead of over her head. Without it, her long ears caught the violet light from passing transport beams, and the markings on her face glimmered with a calm rhythm, like starlight learning how to breathe. Below them, citizens gathered in clusters, revealing traits they had hidden for years. Translucent arms, uneven horns, bioluminescent freckles, voices that harmonized with machines. A young engineer with crystal growths along her neck activated a broken hover platform no one else could repair. It rose, spun upside down, and gently deposited a council clerk into a fountain. Ethan applauded. Innovation with entertainment value. Earth would fund this immediately. Lyra laughed, but her eyes remained fixed on the crowd. They were all hiding. People hide when the world keeps handing them boxes too small to live in. She looked at him, surprised by the softness in his voice. Before she could answer, a group of children rushed into the repair bay, their ears decorated with wires and glowing stickers. One small boy with silver scales on his chin pointed at Ethan. "Human, am I beautiful too?" Ethan froze as if facing a battle cruiser. "That is a very dangerous question before I have coffee." Lyra folded her arms, smiling. "Answer him." Ethan crouched. "Yes, extremely. Your chin looks like a heroic fish prince preparing to save the galaxy." The boy gasped with delight and ran away shouting, "I am a fish prince." Soon more children arrived, each demanding judgment. Ethan declared one girl's transparent hands, excellent for dramatic ghost tricks, another child's antennae, perfect for receiving secret cookie transmissions, and a nervous little Kalari with one shorter ear, aerodynamically mysterious. Lyra watched them laugh, and something inside her loosened further. For years, children had been taught to fear difference before they learned to spell their own names. Now they were turning shame into games. Yet beyond the laughter, darker eyes watched from the upper balconies. Officials loyal to Veyran spoke into encrypted wrist devices. Beauty merchants closed their holographic advertisements. Perfection clinics, which had grown rich, promising to erase every unusual feature, began losing customers before sunset. On a public screen across the market, an expensive advertisement flickered, "Become acceptable." Then someone hacked it, replacing the slogan with "Become yourself." Underneath, in smaller letters, appeared, "Also, buy less terrible bread." Ethan stared. "I deny responsibility for the bread comment, although I respect the artist." That night, Lyra walked through the central market without her hood. Silence followed her at first, old and sharp. But it was not the same silence as before. People looked, then looked again, as if their eyes were learning a new language. An old woman stepped forward and touched the faded scar across her own forehead. "They told me to cover this for 60 years, she whispered. Lyra reached out and gently lowered the woman's scarf. The crowd watched the simple gesture as if it were a starship landing. Suddenly, a pulse of silver-blue energy spread from Lyra's markings into the pavement, racing through the market's ancient circuits. The dead memory lanterns around them ignited one by one, projecting forgotten faces into the air. Generations of marked Kalari, smiling, building, guiding ships, standing proudly beneath suns long gone. Ethan swallowed, then lifted a hand awkwardly. Well, either that was history waking up, or the lantern seller owes someone a refund. Laughter broke the fear, but no one moved away. Lyra stood among the ghosts of those erased before her, no longer alone, while the city lights shimmered above like a galaxy finally remembering its own stars. By the third day, Lyra's face had traveled farther than Ethan's entire repair career, and looked far more elegant doing it. Her speech in the market, the awakened memory lanterns, and Ethan's unfortunately permanent sentence had been copied into millions of hollow feeds across nearby systems. In the repair bay, Ethan stared at a floating news screen, showing his face paused mid-blink beside the words, "Human Beauty Profit." He slowly turned to Lyra. "Please tell me I don't actually look like that." Lyra studied the image with merciless calm. "Your left eye appears to be escaping. Good. At least one of us has survival instincts." She laughed, but the sound faded when the next broadcast appeared. A famous perfection clinic accused her of using illegal resonance manipulation to influence public emotion. Another commentator claimed her markings were a biological weapon. A third insisted Ethan had been sent by Earth to destroy Kalari beauty standards, which Ethan found insulting because Earth had once considered mullets acceptable. The attacks spread quickly, polished and expensive, hiding cruelty behind elegant words. Lyra watched them with her hands still, her long ears angled downward. "They are afraid." Ethan shut off the screen. People with too much power usually mistake fear for wisdom, also for marketing. Before she could answer, the bay doors opened and 3 inspectors entered wearing white armor, so spotless it looked afraid of dust. Their leader held up a legal prism. "Lyra, of the fractured lineage, you are ordered to submit to resonance restraint until the council determines whether your existence is socially hazardous." Ethan raised his hand. "Question, is there a form where I can report that sentence for being ridiculous?" The inspector ignored him and stepped toward Lyra. The air dimmed, not because of Lyra's power, but because the citizens outside had gathered in silence, blocking the light from the transparent wall. The crystal-necked engineer stood there, the old woman with the uncovered scar, children with glowing stickers, workers, artists, pilots, people who had hidden for years. One by one, they placed their hands against the glass. Lyra looked at them, stunned. The inspector's voice hardened. "Disperse, or this will be classified as civil contamination." Ethan leaned closer to Lyra and whispered, "I've been called many things, but contamination feels new, slightly fancy." Lyra did not smile this time. She stepped forward, and the markings across her face brightened with a steady silver-blue glow. "You want to restrain me because I stopped being ashamed." The legal prism in the inspector's hand flickered. "You are destabilizing social harmony." "No," she said, voice quiet but impossible to ignore. "I am revealing the cost of false harmony." The words struck the room harder than shouting. Outside, dozens of hidden traits began to glow, shimmer, click, hum, or unfold. The crowd was not perfect, and that made it magnificent. The repair-based systems responded to the combined biological frequencies, projecting a vast holographic field above the city. Archived records, altered laws, deleted medical reports, clinic payments, council seals. The conspiracy unfolded in light. Ethan pointed upward. "Well, that's awkward. Your paperwork just confessed." The inspectors stared as their own armor broadcast the files they had been ordered to hide. Somewhere in the crowd, a child shouted, "The Fish Prince demands justice!" And even the old woman laughed through her tears. Lyra stood at the center of it all, no longer shrinking beneath anyone's gaze. Her glow rose into the ceiling, through the tower, into the night, where passing ships slowed to watch Kaler 9 shine like a wounded star refusing to go dark. The morning of the Festival of True Faces arrived with a sky full of lantern drones, singing satellites, and one enormous floating banner that unfortunately displayed Ethan's face in heroic slow motion every 14 seconds. He stood in the central square, staring up at the image of himself, pointing awkwardly toward nothing. "I look like I'm accusing the moon of stealing my sandwich," he said. Lyra, standing beside him without a hood, glanced upward with calm amusement. Her long ears were decorated with thin silver rings, and the markings across her face glowed gently in the daylight, no longer hidden, no longer feared. The children voted for that image. The children are cruel political masterminds. Around them, Kaler 9 had transformed. People walked openly with crystal growths, glowing skin, asymmetrical horns, extra pupils, artificial limbs painted like constellations, and voices that made nearby machines hum in harmony. The old Perfection Clinic towers had been converted into public archives, their advertisements replaced by records of the erased celestial resonance lineage. Varen's council had collapsed under the weight of its own sealed files, which Ethan privately called death by paperwork, the most civilized execution. Yet celebration did not come without wounds. Some citizens still watched Lyra with discomfort, as if generations of fear were stubborn rust in the mind. She noticed, but she did not lower her eyes. When the first memory lantern rose, it projected the faces of marked ancestors across the clouds, each one luminous and proud. The crowd fell silent. Lyra stepped onto the ceremony platform, where a new statue waited beneath a silver cloth. Ethan had been promised it was tasteful. He should have known that word was dangerous. The cloth dropped. The statue revealed him standing beside Lyra, one hand raised, mouth half open, captured forever in the exact expression of a man who had just realized his translator might ruin his life. At its base, carved in gold, were the words, "You look beautiful today." Ethan covered his face. "I cannot believe I survived engine fires, pirate inspections, and military cafeteria soup to be defeated by sculpture." Lyra laughed so hard the glow across her cheeks brightened into rippling blue light. The crowd laughed with her, and the sound loosened the last hard edges of the square. Then a small child with one shorter ear climbed onto the platform and placed a handmade medal around Ethan's neck. It was crooked, sticky, and appeared to be made from candy wrappers and spare drone parts. "For the beauty prophet," the child declared. Ethan looked at Lyra. "Can I resign?" "No." "Can I at least request snacks?" "Also no." The laughter faded when Lyra stepped to the edge of the platform. Her voice carried through the square, through the sky bridges, through every open channel across the planet. "For years, I believed I was alone, because that is what I was taught. But loneliness was not born in me. It was built around me." The crowd listened, many with tears shining in strange and beautiful eyes. A single kind sentence did not change the world by itself. It reminded us that the world had been waiting to change. Ethan looked at her, and for once he had no joke ready. Above them, the ancestor projections bowed like constellations bending toward dawn. Then the city answered. thousands of voices rose, different in pitch, species, rhythm, and language, forming a vast living harmony that made the old tower circuits blaze to life. Kaler 9 shone so brightly that ships in orbit adjusted their shields. Ethan finally whispered, "Okay, that is slightly better than my statue." Lyra smiled, radiant and unafraid. "Only slightly?" He nodded solemnly. "Your dramatic timing still needs supervision." Her laughter joined the music, and the planet kept glowing. 1 year later, ships no longer approached Kellar 9 with suspicion. They arrived slowly, almost reverently, as if entering the orbit of a planet that had learned to speak a new language. The old market where Lyra had once hidden beneath a gray hood had become the Hall of True Faces. Its memory, lanterns, restored. Its walls, alive with holograms of ancestors whose names had been returned to history. Lyra stood beneath them in a silver diplomatic coat, her long ears uncovered, her luminous markings bright and calm. Children ran past her laughing, their differences displayed like medals from wars they had never needed to fight. Ethan followed behind, carrying a toolbox and 3 ceremonial gifts he had been told were priceless, one of which kept biting him. "I respect your culture," he told the snapping crystal sculpture, "but if you remove my finger, we are no longer friends." Lyra smiled without looking back. "That sculpture represents eternal gratitude. It represents dental ambition." She laughed, and the sound still surprised him sometimes, not because it was rare now, but because he remembered when it had been. The council had been rebuilt, with seats reserved for every lineage once excluded. Veyron, stripped of office, now worked in the archive, repairing the records he had helped bury. He avoided Ethan for 6 months, until Ethan handed him a broken scanner and said, "Congratulations, you have been promoted to useful." Somehow, that had helped more than punishment. The perfection clinics had become resident schools, teaching young Kalari to understand the abilities hidden in traits once called defects. The crystal-necked engineer designed ships that navigated storms by listening to biological harmonics. The fish prince, now wearing a cape made of emergency foil, had become the unofficial guardian of the fountain. No one questioned it. Frankly, Ethan was afraid to. That evening, representatives from 7 worlds gathered to sign the Kellar Accord, a treaty promising protection for altered, rare, and outcast lineages across the frontier. Lyra stepped before them, no longer trembling beneath attention. "I spent most of my life believing survival meant becoming smaller," she said. "But kindness did not make me fragile. It reminded me I was never broken." Her markings glowed, and the restored lanterns answered, filling the hall with soft blue stars. Ethan stood in the back, proud and deeply uncomfortable, when several delegates bowed to him. "Please stop," he whispered. "I once lost a fight with a vending machine." Lyra turned, eyes shining. "And yet you changed my world." He shook his head. "No, you did that. I just said the obvious before everyone else remembered how." For a moment, the hall was quiet, not empty, not cruel, but full of understanding. Later, after the treaty was signed and the guests drifted into celebration, Lyra and Ethan walked through the market's lower bridge. A lonely traveler stood near a lantern stall, hood pulled low, strange amber veins glowing across their hands, while passers-by hesitated at a distance. Lyra stopped. Ethan did, too. She looked at him, and he saw the woman she had been and the leader she had become living together in the same gentle smile. Then Lyra stepped forward, warm and unafraid. "You look beautiful today," she said. The traveler lifted their heads stunned. Somewhere behind them, Ethan sighed. "Careful. That sentence causes paperwork." Lyra laughed, the lanterns bloomed, and above Kellar 9, the stars seemed closer than ever.